بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue in our discussion of what Imam Al-Tahawi mentioned when he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is transcended from having limits, extreme ends, parts, limbs, small organs, and that the 6 directions do not contain him. But I wanted to first go over in our book, Reliance of the Traveler, the position of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, meaning the Asha'ira and Maturidiyya, about Tanzihullah Ta'ala anil Makani wa Zaman, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is transcended and exalted above time and place. So we're going to read from the notes and appendices on page 859, the statement of a Sheikh Muhammad Hamid. And it's on page 859, W8.0. Now,
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, W8.0. Allah Ta'ala is exalted above needing space or time. W8.1. Muhammad Hamid. What is obligatory for a human being?
Muhammad Al-Hamid.
Muhammad Al-Hamid. Excuse me. What is obligatory for a human being to know is that Allah Ta'ala is the Creator, glory be to Him, is absolutely free of need, al-Ghani, or anything He has created, and free of need for the heavens or the earth. He is transcendently beyond being in the sky or being on earth, in the manner that things are in things. Created beings and created beings, or things and circumstances, are encompassed by their circumstances, for it is He who. There is nothing whatsoever like unto him, and he is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. Quran, Surah 42, Ayah 11.
Here, this, what Sheikh Muhammad Hamid mentioned, the attribute of Al-Qiyamu bin Nafs. Al-Qiyamu bin Nafs means Sifatul Al-Qiyamu bin Nafs means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of need of anything He created. And He is Al-Qadim, and everything else is Hadith. 3 attributes of Allah are highlighted whenever we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is without a place. Number 1, the attribute of Al-Qidam, the attribute that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning to His existence. Number 2, the attribute of Al-Qiyamu bin Nafs, that Allah is not in need of anything. And number 3, the attribute al-mukhalafatu lil-hawadith, that Allah is dissimilar to all of his creation. Whenever you have these 3 attributes, you understand from them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of place, or in the case we're talking now, direction or time. Now,
And he did not give birth, nor was he born, and there is none who is his equal. Quran, Surah 114, ayat 3 through 4.
for both of those verses, ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. All of those 2 verses, they indicate the attribute of al-mukhalifatu lil-hawadith, that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala does not resemble his creation. Now,
Aside from all the proofs from the Quran and Sunnah, the rational evidence is decisive that Allah Ta'ala Most High is absolutely beyond any resemblance to created things in his entity, attributes, and acts. The noble Quranic verse, He is Allah Ta'ala in the heavens and the earth. He knows your secrets and what you reveal, and knows what you are earning. Quran Surah 6, Ayah 3. Means that he most glorious is the one who is rightfully worshipped in both the heavens and earth, who alone possesses the attribute of divinity in both, and the inhabitants of the heavens know he is the true God, just as the inhabitants of the earth know it, and the former worship him just as the latter do. W8.2 Qurtubi.
I want
Allah
to read, before we go there, I'm sorry, I want to read about Imam al-Qurtubi, which is at, because he's an important figure that I didn't mention to you, but what he's going to say here is very important. Al-Qurtubi Al-Qurtubi is a famous mufassir. If we go to page 1090, X 301, before we go, and then we'll go back to Al-Qurtubi. Al-Qurtubi is a famous commentator of the Quran, and he is one of the reliable books of tafsir. His books is among the reliable books of tafsir. Go ahead.
X301 Imam Qurtubi is Muhammad ibn Ahmed ibn Abu Bakr ibn Farah Abu Abdullah al-Ansari al-Qurtubi of Cordova in present-day Spain, a Maliki scholar and hadith specialist who was one of the greatest imams of Quranic exegesis, an ascetic who divided his days between worship and writing. Educated in hadith by masters like Ali ibn Muhammad al-Yahsabi and al-Hassan ibn Muhammad al-Bakri, he wrote works in the sciences of hadith and tenets of faith, though his enduring contribution in his 20-volume Al-Jami lil Ahkam al-Quran, the
Al-Jami'u
compendium.
Ahkam al-Quran by Al-Qurtubi. You should highlight that. That is among the 3 most famous tafsirs that deal with riwayah, or narration of ahadith and verses of the Quran. You have Tafsir al-Tabari, Tafsir al-Qurtubi, and Tafsir Ibn Kathir. So Tafsir al-Qurtubi is one. And for those who, let me see something. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. I don't like to do this, but I mean, yeah, I do. But if you look at this cover, this is the translation of the meanings of the Quran that are printed by Al-Wahhabiyya, who call themselves as Salafiyya, right? I'm gonna come closer, right? All of you may be aware of this, but you notice he says, they say here, uh, interpretation of the meanings of the Noble Quran in the English language. And I just come closer so you can see a summarized version of At-Tabari, meaning a tafsir At-Tabari, Al-Qurtubi, tafsir Al-Qurtubi, and Ibn Kathir, and the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, right? So the claim is this, that when one reads this, one would think, he said with comments from Sahih Bukhari, one would think what's in this book is believed by At-Tabari, Al-Qurtubi, and Ibn Kathir, right? When you read it, that's the false perception that you get. But this is not true. What's in this book contradicts Tafsir al-Tabari, Tafsir al-Qurtubi, and Tafsir Ibn Kathir, and Sahih Bukhari. It's deep. So they put it on it to help make you think the book is authentic. But when you read what's inside the book, it contradicts what is in Tafsir al-Tabari, what is in Tafsir al-Qurtubi, what is in Tafsir Ibn Kathir, and what is in Sahih al-Bukhari. So I wanted you to show why Qurtubi isn't significant, because they try to promote in their books as if they're following Imam al-Qurtubi. And we're going to discuss the belief of Imam al-Qurtubi, and then you'll see the belief in this book. That's a whole nother thing. But this is only when you know. Go ahead.
The compendium of the rules of the Quran, from which he mainly omitted the stories and histories customary in other commentaries, and recorded instead the legal rulings contained in the Quran and how scholars have inferred them, together with canonical readings, qira'at, Arabic grammar, and which verses abrogate others and which are abrogated, nasikh wa mansukh. Scholars have used it extensively ever since it was written. It is related that Qurtubi disdained heirs and used to walk about in a simple kaftan with a plain cap, takiya, on his head. He traveled east and settled in Munya Abi al-Kusayb in Upper Egypt, where he died in 671.
Okay, so we got Al-Qurtubi, and you should put it in Al-Qurtubi in 671 in the 7th century. So Al-Qurtubi was before Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim and all of those. Now, I want you to read Al-Qurtubi's tafsir on verse, its explanation on verse Surah 67 and Surah Mulk, verse number 16. Let me here, if you look there, this is verse number 16, right? You can see it, yes. Verse number 16 of Surah Mulk. And it reads, is on page 885. Do you feel secure that he who is over the heaven, and he put Allah, will not cause the earth to sink with you? Then behold, it shakes as in an earthquake. So from that verse, the Salafis put in there that Allah is in heaven or above the heaven, right? And they, as we discussed, said that is a makan and a jihad for Allah, a place and a direction for Allah. Let's read what Al-Qurtubi said in his tafsir about that verse. Pay attention to the belief of Al-Qurtubi as opposed to the belief of Al-Wahhabiyya as-Salafiyya. We're going to read it. Go ahead.
Qurtubi, Allah Ta'ala Most High says, do you feel secure that he who is in the heavens will not make the earth swallow you while it quakes? Quran, Surah 67, Ayah 16. Which may mean, do you feel secure that he who is the creator of whomever is in the heavens, and I'm sorry, that whomever is in heavens will not make the earth swallow you, as he did Korah. The more exacting hold that it, per the narrator, i.e., in the heavens, signifies, do you feel secure from him who is over the heavens? Just as Allah Ta'ala says, journey in the earth. Quran Surah 9, Ayah 2. Meaning over it, not over it by way of physical contact or spatialization, but by way of omnipotent power and control.
Now,
Another,
when he says over the heavens, look what he says, right? فوقها لا بالمماسة ولا والتهيس, not being in contact, mumasa, or التهيس, being in a location or being in a place, rather by القهر وتدبير, by omnipotent power and managing and controlling. So he didn't say Allah is in a location or a direction. He said that indicates what? The opposite of that. That Allah is not in contact with anything, nor is Allah in a space. Subhanallah. Now, go ahead.
another position is that it means, do you feel secure from him who is over Allah, the heavens? I.e., just as it is said, so and so is over Iraq and the Hijaz, meaning that he is the governor and commander of them. The
Meaning he's in control of them, not meaning he's actually in a place or a location or a direction. Go ahead.
The hadiths on this subject are numerous, rigorously authenticated, sahih, and widely known, and indicate the exaltedness of Allah Ta'ala being undeniable by anyone save an atheist or obstinate ignoramus. Their meaning is to dignify Allah Ta'ala and exalt Him above what is base and low, to characterize Him by exaltedness and grandeur, not by being in places, particular directions, or within limits, for these are the qualities of physical bodies.
Did you hear that? Read that back again. Not by what?
Not by means, not by being in places, particular directions, or within limits, for these are the qualities of physical bodies.
So places, right? He said, لا بالأماكن والجهات والحدود. What did Al-Tahawi say? Right? Ta'ala Allah anil hudud. Limits. He's clear of that. Right? He's not contained by the 6 directions. What did Al-Qurtubi say? Allah is not in places or directions, nor does he have limits. Pay attention. لِأَنَّهَا صِفَةُ الْأَجْسَامِ, because places, directions, limits are all attributes of bodies. So hear this? This is Al-Qurtubi. He didn't say Allah is in a place. He said that Allah is free of places. He didn't say Allah is in a direction. Allah is free of directions. He didn't say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has limits, free of limits. Pay attention to this point, because as we mentioned yesterday, what Fawzan mentioned was that Allah has a direction and he exists in a non-existent place. And he has limits, where the Ash'ira, Maturidiyya, our author, Imam Al-Tahawi, and the commentator, Al-Ghaznawi, and we read what Sayyid Ahmed Jabir Jubran said. We mentioned what Sheikh Abdullah Al-Harari mentioned. All of those, and we're going to mention more, said that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is not attributed with places, directions, or limits. Now, go ahead.
The hands are only raised skyward when one supplicates, because the sky is from whence divine revelation descends and rains fall, the place of purity and the wellspring of the purified ones of the angels, and that servants' works are raised to it, and over it are the throne and his paradise. Just as Allah Ta'ala has made the Kaaba the direction of supplication and the prayer. He created all places and has no need of them. He was without space or time in his beginningless, beginningless eternality before creating space and time, and is now as he has ever been.
And here, وكان في أزله قبل خلق المكان والزمان ولا مكان له ولا زمان وهو الآن على ما عليه كان. Allah existed eternally and there was no place, and he exists now without a place. He created the places. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not attributed with places, directions, and limits. But here we find those who put his tafsir on the cover of their books to say that Allah is above the heaven, and that is a direction for Allah. Wal-iyadhu billah. But use the name of the scholars to try to promote a belief that those scholars explicitly mention in their books is not their belief. Did y'all follow that? Was it clear for you? What those Wahhabis put in this book and put the name of Al-Qurtubi on it and mention a belief that is contrary to what Al-Qurtubi wrote in the same book they say that they took from? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Tell you. Now, I want to go to our section on page number 10, because this is Imam An-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book Majmu'ah. He mentions about these verses, and we saw Al-Qurtubi explain this verse, and he went between at-ta'wil and at-tafweed, right? But he inclined to at-ta'wil. So I wanted to show you where Imam An-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, mentioned that how we are to understand these attributes of Allah. Now, go ahead.
A4.3. Scholars disagree about the Quranic verses and hadiths that deal with the attributes of Allah Ta'ala. Remarked by the translator, such as his hand, Quran, Surah 48, Ayah 10, his eyes, Surah 52, Ayah 48, or his nearness, Surah 50, Ayah 16, as to whether they should be discussed in terms of a particular figurative interpretation, ta'wil, as defined in W6, or not. Some say that they should be figuratively interpreted, as befits them. For the translator, interpreting his hand, for example, as an allusion to his omnipotence, and this is the more well-known of the two positions of the scholastic theologians. Others say that such verses should not be given a definitive interpretation, but rather their meaning should not be discussed, and the knowledge of them should be consigned to Allah Ta'ala Most High, while at the same time believing in the transcendence of Allah Ta'ala Most High, and that the characteristics of created things do not apply to him. For example, it should be said, we believe that the All-Merciful is established. In Arabic, istawa, as discussed at 1.3, on the throne.
So,
Quran,
Ar-Rahman ala al-Arsh istawa.
Quran, Surah 20, Ayah 5. But we do not know the reality of the meaning of that, nor what is intended thereby, though we believe of Allah Ta'ala Most High that there is nothing whatsoever like unto him. Quran, Surah 42, Ayah 11. And that he is above indwelling in created things, hulul, as discussed at W7, or having the characteristics of temporal contingent existence, huduth, as discussed at W.8. And this is the path of the early Muslims, or the vast majority of them, and is the safest, for a person is not required to enter into discussions about this. When one believes in Allah Ta'ala's transcendence above created things, there is no need for debate on it. or for taking risk over what there is neither pressing necessity nor even any real call for. But if the need arises for definitive interpretations to refute someone making unlawful innovations and the like, then the learned may supply them, and this is how we should understand what has come down to us from scholars in the field, and Allah Ta'ala knows best.
So Imam An-Nawawi says that the best way to deal with these ayat and verses by tafweed, reciting them, leaving the meaning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and declaring Allah transcended above attributes of creation, right? And attributes of the creation are attributes of bodies, having contingency, being and a created event, or anything relates to that. So that would negate places, directions, limits. But in the case of someone who's perverting in the belief, like we have with the Wahhabiyya or Salafiyya, then it is obligatory to go into more details and explain it in a definitive interpretation. Wallahu tabaraka wa ta'ala a'lam. And Allah knows best. Inshallah, we're going to read that long section of Ibn Abi al-Iz and his commentary on those things, because this commentary is the basis for all of those of Al-Wahhabiyya and Salafiyya who came after, like Bin Baz, like Al-Albany, like Fawzan, like Ibn Uthaymeen, and all the others who follow them. Their explanation of the Creed of Al-Tahawiyya, or their notes and comments on the Creed of Al-Tahawiyya, are summaries of what Ibn Abi al-Iz al-Hanafi wrote in his book, in his explanation of the Creed of Al-Tahawi, which was really not an explanation, but a refutation. So we want to read that and then make sure we understand the differences and discuss it. Bismillah. We're quoting these statements, not affirming them. That's very important, because some of these statements are not permissible to believe. So we're only quoting what he said, not affirming what he said. We negate his interpretation, but we're reading it so that we're aware of it, and then we distinguish the difference from what he's saying and what Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah said. We already know the position of Ahl Sunnah. That's why we read it first, that Allah exists without limits, without being in a place, without being in a direction, without organs, without limbs, and any attribute of created things. Now, go ahead.
Bold print. Allah Ta'ala is supremely exalted above definition of him, or from being restricted, or from needing any parts, limbs, or instruments. He is not bound by the 6 directions of space, as all created beings are.
Now, this translation, the 6 directions of space is why is it translated like that? He didn't say the 6 directions of space. He said the 6 directions. But why he's saying 6 directions of space? Because as Fawzan mentioned, their belief is that there is such thing as created places and non-created places. And the non-created place and the 6 directions of created places, what is above that is a non-created place. That's their belief. So that's why they added these words to match their belief. But Al-Tahawi actually said Allah is not contained by the 6 directions, not the 6 directions of space. Go ahead.
Before commenting on this text, I would like to make a few general remarks. First, people can be divided into 3 groups on the question of whether terms like those mentioned in the text can be applied to Allah Ta'ala. One group affirms such terms.
So He's saying what Al-Tahawi mentioned. Now, this is Ibn Abi Is, who came in the 8th century. He's challenging the wording of Imam Al-Tahawi, who was from the Salaf, who got his teachings from the Salaf, right? So he's coming and going to explain, is it permissible to use these words? Go ahead.
One group affirms such terms for Allah Ta'ala, another group denies them, a third group, which follows the way of the elders, calls for more clarification. The third group neither affirms them in general until it is made clear that what is
No.
affirmed.
So the elders is a tranju. That's a bad translation. He says one group negates them, another group affirms them, and another group goes into more detail. And then he says, وَهُمْ مَتَّبِعُونَ لِلسَّلَفِ. He says they are the ones who follow the way of the Salaf. Ala za'mihi. That's what he claims, right? So the elders here, what he meant is the Salaf, the early Muslims. Go ahead.
The third group neither affirms them in general until it is made clear that what is affirmed by such terms is to be affirmed and what is negated by such terms is to be negated. They take this approach because later scholars use such terminology that includes a lot of vagueness and ambiguities, as is
So
the case
here
with
he says, in this, he says, لأن المتأخرين يعني المتأخرين من العلماء, the latter scholars, من الخلف, right? That's what he's indicating because they're not following the way of Salaf. قد صارت هذه الألفاظ في اصطلاحهم فيها إجمال والإبهام. He says that what the later scholars did, they used these words in their terminology, and in these words are ijmal, brevity, and ibham. It's confusing. It has some unclarity, non-clarity, or in it, inclarity. What's the word for that? Help me out.
You're talking about for something that's the opposite of clear?
Yeah. It's,
Unclear?
okay, unclear. So if I say clarity, what's the opposite of clarity?
I don't know. Unclear?
Okay. So it has unclear, vague. It has some vagueness in it. So it has brevity and vagueness. Barakallahu bikum. Vagueness. Yes. Ibham is vagueness, sort of. Okay, good. Okay. So now remember, we talked about this yesterday. This is what he's saying. So it has this ambiguity, it has this vagueness, it has this lack of clarity, and it's brief. It's not having a clear expression. You got to look into it. Whereas Imam Al-Tahawi said, هذا ذكر بيان عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة. He said, it's clear, not mubham, it's clear. Bayan, it's explicit, it has details. Go ahead.
They take this approach because later scholars use such terminology that includes a lot of vagueness and ambiguities, as is the case with other types of terminology. Therefore, not all of them use the same term to mean exactly the same. Hence, anyone who denies it completely.
So they said that's more, they don't use the terminology in their exact same linguistic meaning. Go ahead.
Hence, anyone who denies it completely denies what is both correct and incorrect without discrimination, and imputes to those who affirm them things that they never said. Some of those who affirm such terms include in their connotations ideals that go against the views of the elders. Salad.
Meaning, he said, some of them who affirm these literal meanings, they affirm things that are batil, right? Mukhalif liqawli salaf. So the elders here is as salaf. When you hear he's using the word elders, he means as salaf, salaf as-salih, the early Muslims. So he says some people who affirm the attributes, they go against the Salaf. Go ahead.
And conflict with the Quran and Sunnah, or have nothing in them either for or against them. We have not the right to attribute to Allah Ta'ala things that He did not attribute to Himself, nor did the Messenger of Allah Ta'ala sallallahu alaihi wasallam attribute to Him, either with respect to negation or affirmation. On this point, we must be followers and not innovators.
Okay, so his claim, which is the claim of these Wahhabiyya and Salafiyya today, this was the claim of Ibn Taymiyyah as well, that we ascribe to Allah what Allah ascribed to Himself, or what the Messenger ascribed to Him. That's what they claim. And we affirm that. Go ahead.
It is necessary to investigate this subject, that is, the subject of attributes, and to attribute to Allah Ta'ala what Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger have affirmed, and to negate of Allah Ta'ala what Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger have negated.
Tayyib.
Adhering to the terms used in the text of the Quran and Sunnah will protect one in matters of affirmation and negation. We affirm what terms and meanings Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have affirmed. In addition,
here terms, if you want, you can say al-alfaz, words. So you have al-alfaz and al-ma'ani. You have words and meanings, right? So he says that we affirm what Allah and His Messenger affirm among words and meanings. Pay attention. Al-faz wal-ma'ani. Right? Go ahead.
In addition, we negate any terms or meanings that the text have negated.
Right? So now he's taking two things, and we pay attention to this. You have words and meanings. Words, al-faz, and ma'ani. Right? And meanings. Al-faz, words, ma'ani, meanings. Go ahead.
As for the terms concerning which there is no explicit affirmation or negation, we do not make any general statement about them until we can determine what is meant by them. If their meanings are correct, we accept them, although it is best to use the terms actually found in the text of the Quran and Sunnah, and not use the vague terms unless there is a pressing need to do so. But even then, they must be accompanied by contextual evidence that shows their meanings. For example, one might be speaking to someone who will not be convinced or will not understand except when those terms are employed. The author has included this passage in order to refute anthropomorphists like Dawood el-Jawaribi and others like him who say that Allah Ta'ala is a solid thing or a body with organs. Exalted is He above what they ascribe to Him.
When they say a solid thing, mean inna Allah jism. So he said, if you say Allah is a jism, they say he negates that. Go ahead.
The author is correct in his statement, but later, people extended his negation and overstepped the limits. This is in need of further explanation. The elders are in agreement that man cannot define Allah Ta'ala or His attributes.
So he says that Imam Al-Tahawi, right, by negating Allah being a body, right, he's correct. But he's saying people came after him and they made this general negation. They put in the things that are true and things that are false, right? Now he's going to say what the Salaf believe, the elders, meaning as-Salaf. Go ahead.
Abu Dawood at-Tayalisi said that Sufyan, Shuba, Hamad ibn Zayd, Hamad ibn Salama, Shuraik, and Abu Uwaina never tried to define Allah Ta'ala.
Abu Uwana.
Never tried to define Allah Ta'ala or liken Him to or compare Him with anything. They would simply
So all of those are from the Salaf, They didn't give Allah limbs. They didn't give Allah limits. They didn't liken him to the creation, and they didn't give him similitudes. Okay.
They would simply narrate the hadith and refuse to elaborate on the narrations. When pressed, they would
That's
only
not what
quote.
it says here. He said, Yarawna, listen to this. Now read that again. They would narrate the hadith.
They would simply narrate the hadith and refuse to elaborate on the narrations.
So it says, Yarwuna al hadith, ولا يقولون كيف, وإذا سئلوا قالوا بالأثر. Now read it one more time.
They would simply narrate the hadith and refuse to elaborate on the narrations.
Now, he said what the original says. They would narrate the hadith and they would not say how. They wouldn't even talk about a how, right? And when they were questioned about it, they would say whatever the narration is. That's it. Full stop. Right? Full stop. That's the way of the Salaf. But that is not the way of as-Salafiyya or al-Wahhabiyya. And he's going to show it. Go ahead.
When pressed, they would only quote a saying of a companion or a successor. We will return to that point when discussing the author's words. He has barred his creatures from comprehending him. He means that no one can define Allah Ta'ala, and not that Allah Ta'ala is not distinguished from his creation, separate from it, apart from it.
You hear that? So here he's taking there's creation and then there's Allah. So Allah is separate from his creation. He's not connected with the creation. The creation is in one location and Allah is in another. Wal-iyadu billah. Go ahead.
Abdullah ibn Abu Bakr was asked, how should we think of our Lord? He said, think that he is on the throne, completely different from his creatures. Someone asked, is he different by definition? He said, yes, by definition. We know that definition sometimes refers to what separates one thing from another and distinguishes it. Since Allah Ta'ala does not reside in any of his creation, nor does he exist by them, but on the contrary, he exists by himself and brings all things into existence and sustains them. No one would object to defining Allah Ta'ala in this sense. Otherwise, it would mean denying Allah Ta'ala's existence and essence. But if we understand definition in the sense of comprehending him as he is and stating it in words, that is impossible. There is a consensus among the Ahl Sunnah on this point. Abu al-Qasim al-Kushairi says in his Risala that
All right.
Abu
And here I want you to pause. He's quoting Abu Qasim al-Kushairi. Abu Qasim al-Kushairi wrote his book, Al-Risalatul Kushairiyah. And he was the head of the people of Tasawwuf and Ash'ari, and he was Ash'ari in his time. So from this, you would give the illusion that Imam al-Kushairi believed this. When Imam al-Kushairi, and we'll go to his books, he negated attributing to Allah a limit, a had, where Ibn Abi al-Iz is affirming to Allah a had from someone who is well known to have negated that. Go ahead.
Abu al-Qasim al-Kushairi says in his Risala that Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami narrated from Abu Mansur ibn Abdullah and he from Abu al-Hasan al-Anbari that Sahal ibn Abdullah at-Tustari, answering a question about the existence of God, said, Allah Ta'ala's essence is qualified with knowledge. He cannot be encompassed in knowledge or seen by eyes in this world. He is available to faith, but transcends definition and comprehension, and does not reside in anything. Eyes will see him in the hereafter, manifested in his power and authority. He has barred creatures from knowing his essence, but has helped them to know him through his signs. Hence, hearts know him, but eyes cannot compass him. The faithful will see him with their eyes, but encompass him or scan his majesty, they will not. As for the terms parts, limbs, or instruments, Some of the negators use them to deny some attributes that are confirmed by the definitive evidence,
So he
such as
calls whoever, when Imam Al-Tahawi mentioned that Allah is free of parts and organs and limbs, he says, and nufat, those who are negators, they use this to negate some of Allah's attributes, right? So he's talking about the Asharis and Maturidiyah, right? Go ahead.
such as hand and face. Abu
So
Hanifa
al-Yad and al-Wajh, he says that they negate. What he means by that, which is clear, that they don't interpret them as literal attributes that are having meanings that relate to the meanings of human being. So a hand and limb is al-a'dha. So we know that Allah doesn't have limits. But he says, and there on this, if you don't say Allah has limbs, then you negate yad and wajh. Go ahead.
Abu Hanifa wrote in Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, Allah Ta'ala has a hand, yad, face, wajh, and a soul, nafs. He has himself mentioned them in the Quran. They are his attributes, and we must affirm them without inquiring into their nature. We
La
should
la
never
la 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 la. A'udhu billah. Say it again.
They are his attributes, and we must affirm them without inquiring into their nature.
Right? Here's the thing. He said he has a yad and wajh and nafs, right? كما ذكر تعالى في القرآن, right? By mentioning yad and wajh. He said, فَهُوَ لَهُ الصِّفَاتِ بِلَا كَيْفٍ. They're the attributes of Allah, and there is no how. Bila kayf. No how for Allah or his attributes. Now, that's Imam Abu Hanifa. That translation wasn't bringing out that point. Go ahead.
We should never say that his hand is power or blessings, as by doing so one nullifies the attribute.
So here, as you can see, Abu Hanifa, he said, Bila kayf. There is no how. No how for Allah or his attributes. Now,
What the Imam stated is confirmed by definitive evidence. For example, Allah Ta'ala has said, "What prevents you from prostrating yourself to one whom I have created with my two hands?" Surah 38,
mm-hmm.
Ayah 75. Also, on the day of judgment, the whole of the earth will be but his handful, and the heavens will be rolled up in his right hand. Surah 39, Ayah 67.
Biyamin. Mm-hmm.
Concerning his face, Allah Ta'ala has stated, everything that exists will perish except his own countenance. Surah 28, Ayah 88. Also, but will abide forever the countenance of your Lord. Surah 55, Ayah 27. Concerning his soul, Allah Ta'ala has stated, quoting Isa, salam, you know what is in my soul, though I know not what is in your soul. Nafs. Surah 5, Ayah 116. And your Lord has inscribed for himself, nafsihi, the rule of mercy. Surah 6, Ayah 54. Also, and I have prepared you for myself, nafsi. Surah 20, Ayah 41. And finally, but Allah Ta'ala cautions you to remember his soul, nafsahu. Surah 3, Ayah 28.
Let's stop there. We'll pick up tomorrow, inshallah. Here, so I want you to understand here we're establishing from their own works. You see the difference between Ahl Sunnah, the Ash'aris and Maturidis, and the difference of Ibn Abi al-Iz and Bin Baz and Albany and Fawzan and Ibn Uthaymeen, all of them, and how they understood the words of Imam Al-Tahawi. As you could see, they're not explaining Al-Tahawi, they're actually refuting Al-Tahawi. And Tahawi would know that he's being refuted in their mind is because not only every one of the other scholars who explain the book of Al-Tahawi, they understood the same belief as Imam Al-Tahawi had mentioned. Is this clear to y'all, or is it becoming clear, or do you have questions? I'm highlighting these points because once you know the difference, then you can make, the adequate assessment and judgment. Is it clear? All of this clear, or it's a little bit overkill? Becoming clear. Vague. Okay. Boom bap. Okay. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Good. What I believe is a part for us really to we have to master these things because we're faced with them. And once we get a good understanding of it, then, a lot of the things that we consider Aqidah wars is not Aqidah wars, is actually clarifying truth and falsehood. It's not an Aqidah war. But we got to understand what is being said first. And that's why Malika's saying a good point. She said, it's becoming clear, but from conversation recently with some Salafi, they understand the attributes as we do, limitless, incomparable to creation. And what you got to understand is a lot of people, they say they're Salafi and they don't know the Salafi Aqidah. They just they like the uniform, but they don't know what they say. They don't understand what's being said to them. They don't read well. They don't have anything to compare it with. So they don't even know what's being said. But when it's explained to them, they'll say, oh, that's what I believe. Yeah, I know. You're not a Salafi. You think you're a Salafi. Do you follow what I mean? So that's the problem. So that's why I say when you hear the term Salafi, somebody say Salafi, don't rush. They probably, most of the time, they don't even know what they're saying. They need to be taught. Because what is happening, especially in our community, they're just given a uniform. All right, here's the uniform. Keep your pants above your ankles. Put on this white thobe. Sometimes you don't have to wear a kufi. Sometimes you wear a kufi. All right, here, that's a deviant. That's a deviant. That's bid'ah. That's bid'ah. We on the minhaj, the haq. We're salaf. Go for it. Here's a couple pretty pamphlets. Go. Woman, hey, sister, put on a black veil, put on the niqab, put on this. You ain't going to learn much, but you in the house, obey, follow where your salaf, obey your husband. There you go. And that's the bottom line. Nothing more, nothing less. And those people go 10, 15, 20 years like that. Don't know anything. And this is common. I'm not being sarcastic. It's the common way. That's how it is. And it's sad. So, right. Just have followed Quran and Sunnah, and that's it. And anyone who be honest, especially the women who've been victim of it, they know what I'm talking about. So you don't judge people by that because they don't know. They don't know at all. And it ain't because they're not intelligent. They don't teach them. Just give them, here's the map, here's the blind following, and stick with that. And if you don't know, you think that's Islam. We on it. We on the hawk. I know. That's how it works. All right, may Allah make it easy. Prepare yourself. We only have a few days for Ramadan. No more coffee, no more tea. La ilaha illallah. Got to get up early and have your coffee and tea. MashaAllah. Tonight, 8 o'clock, Sheikh Walid Al-Rifai will continue. All right. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. بارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.